You guys know me as Scraw, but my real name is Jacob, and on May 19th, 2024, I qualified for the Pokemon World Championships for the first time. This is a huge milestone for me, so I wanted to share the story of how we got here. My Pokemon journey started when I was in kindergarten. My family was planning a road trip to Florida, and my mom and dad needed to figure out a way to get me to shut up for a 24-hour car ride. So they got me a copy of Pokemon Sapphire and a Game Boy Advanced. I had watched the Pokemon shows up until then, and I had some cards, and I'm pretty sure my brothers had the older games, but this was the first time I had a Pokemon journey all of my own. I booted up the game and picked my first starter, Trico, which for some reason I have basically zero attachment to, so I guess I'm a sociopath. But even if I didn't love Trico, I was hooked on the Pokemon franchise. My mom loves to tell a story about how, about a year or two later, I just refused to learn how to ride a bike, and they'd been trying for months and months and months to get me to ride, and I just wouldn't do it. So one day, my mom walked up to me while I was playing my Game Boy. She asked me how I was doing, and I told her excitedly that I'd just beaten Wally on Victory Road for the first time, and how I was close to beating the game. So what'd she do? She took my Game Boy away, and an hour later, I knew how to ride a bike. So, I guess Pokemon's a good motivator, but I'm not gonna tell you every story from my childhood involving Pokemon, just the ones that I think kind of are worthwhile. Fast forward a few years to high school, and a friend of mine told me something I just couldn't believe. People play Pokemon competitively. He told me about this website called Pokemon Showdown, where we could battle Pokemon without having to train them. I didn't really get it at the time, because I didn't understand EVs or IVs, and I already had a level 100 Gardevoir and Garchomp, the two best Pokemon. But I figured he knew what he was talking about, so I went on the website, booted it up, and was introduced for the first time to Smogon and OU. And frankly, I really didn't like it. The games felt slow, and it felt like you could make a mistake on turn 5, but you wouldn't actually lose the game because of it until turn 50. Just boring. I was more interested in double battles, and I tried to get my friends to do the same thing, but they weren't really interested in playing Pokemon in a way they thought was gimmicky. So they kept on playing their stall wars, and I got disenfranchised from Pokemon. I didn't grow to dislike it or anything, I just didn't really have a reason to play each game after I beat the Elite Four for the first time. And all through Generation 7, whenever I did play a Pokemon game, that's all I really did. But I also just didn't play every Pokemon game. I've still never beaten a Gen 5 game. And when the Switch came out with Pokemon Sword and Shield, I really wasn't playing very many video games at all. I was spending most of my free time playing either competitive card games like Magic the Gathering, or competitive tabletop games like Guild Ball, Warhammer, or War Machine. And while I was still interested in Pokemon, I thought particularly that Galar Weezing looked really cool. I just didn't have the money to buy a Nintendo Switch when I knew I would only use it to play one Pokemon game. And then, two things happened that completely changed my life. Number one, happened to all of us, COVID-19 hit into my senior year of college. And the other was something that, frankly, I did to myself. Something I'll never forgive myself for, and I regret almost every day. I went to law school. Yes, in my infinite wisdom, I decided the best thing to do during a global pandemic was to move to a new city, New York City, one of the epicenters of the pandemic, go into massive debt, and start an endeavor that people consider difficult at best and grueling at worst. You know what? It was pretty bad. The first year of law school, things were hybrid still. So we had a few in-person classes with really strict social distancing guidelines, and the rest was online. So the only person I really interacted with and socialized with was my roommate, who I had known from before COVID. And my schedule was basically just go to school, do my class, study alone, and go home and go to bed. And that was really all I did. I tried to play some video games, like I got back into Magic the Gathering online, but it wasn't really interesting to me. But then, one day, when I visited back home to Long Island, I was spending time with two of my best friends, Scott and Sierra, and they were worried about what my life had started to turn into. So they said, you need to do something. And they gave me a gift. A Switch Lite, which I don't have anymore, and I kind of wish I still did, and a copy of Pokemon Shield. So I figured, you know, I never disliked Pokemon, so sure, let's try it, and they were really into it at the time. So I booted up the game, chose Grookey as my starter, and immediately fell back in love with the franchise. I blazed through the game in both DLCs, frankly during a finals week, which probably wasn't a good idea, and I wanted more. During my break from Pokemon, all the games I played competitively. I didn't really play things casually. If I was gonna play a game, I was gonna try to be the best I could be at it. And I remembered my friends saying there was a competitive scene, so I went on YouTube and typed in competitive Pokemon, and pretty quickly found this kind of blurry, grainy video of this guy whose head was cut off by the top of his camera, talking through a PowerPoint like you'd see in high school about competitive Pokemon. They seemed to know what he was talking about, so I slapped it on while I was in the car, driving about an hour and a half back home. He mentioned a few minutes in that competitive Pokemon is done with double battles, and that was when my ears perked up, because turns out high school Jacob was right. I didn't want to be gimmicky. I wanted to play the game the way Pokemon wants you to. I didn't know at the time, but the guy who was talking on that PowerPoint was Wolf Click, the 2016 world champion champion and, frankly, the de facto competitive Pokemon guy on YouTube. And for a while, I spent basically all my free time either playing the game, watching Wolf videos, or trying things I'd seen Wolf done. I wanted to study and learn from him so I could compete. And I found out he had a Discord server full of his fans. Up until that point, I hadn't really talked to a lot of people about competitive Pokemon. It was mostly just on my own. So I figured this would be a great place to learn and practice and just make friends with people who are interested in the game. And then, like many a hyperfixation, I lost interest for a while. A few months came and went, and Pokemon just kind of went to the wayside for me. I would still watch videos when I saw them on my recommended feed, but I didn't think about it as much as I did at first. Until Series 12 was announced. This would be the first format to have live tournaments since COVID, so since I started playing seriously. There was a regional in New Jersey not even 2 hours from my apartment at the time. The perfect chance to see if I'd like this game as a serious competitive outlet. To prepare, I entered a Wolf subserver Discord Pokemon tournament, and actually made it all the way to the semifinals, where I lost to one of the moderators of the server, 17 Cats in a Trench Coat, also known as Scarlet. She would become one of my best friends in the Pokemon scene, and she's a huge part of my growth as a competitive player. This was also around the time I started Scraw VGC. The original idea of the channel was to document myself getting better at the game, and the tournament matches from that first Wolf tournament were actually the first things I uploaded. They're still up, and let's just say the videos have gotten a lot better since then. So Secaucus came, and I thought to myself that if I could get top 4 in a tournament in a YouTuber's Discord server, then I was obviously going to win my first ever regional. I rolled up with a pretty standard team: Zacian, Calyrex Shadow Rider, Blastoise, Rillaboom, Incineroar, and Regieleki, and, well, I didn't win. I went 4-5. But I actually wasn't discouraged. I had loved every second of the regional, and I was able to identify my mistakes, so I knew what I needed to do better. And I wanted a chance to do better. So I booked a last-minute trip to Columbus for the North American International Championships. And oh my god, the atmosphere at international events is absolutely insane. The air is just filled with the love for Pokemon and the energy of everyone competing. It's electrifying. Walking into the convention center, I started to think about how excited I was to prove I could succeed. And round 1, I immediately got my chance. Jacob Mortensen versus Wolf Click. I sit down, say hi, tell him I'm a big fan, get into team preview, and see that he's playing Groudon Lunala, a matchup that frankly I thought was really good for me. I was licking my lips. Could I really prove that I was good at this game by beating one of the best players in the world this early into my career? Well, no, I frankly couldn't. Even though I had a great matchup, Wolf is a lot better at this game than 2022 Jacob was. So he smoked me. But that lit a fire in me. Pokemon is a game where it feels to me that the better player wins a lot of the time, and that's the kind of game worth getting good at. Unfortunately, because of the truncated season, that was my last tournament of Sword and Shield, and I finished 3-6. A lot of people would be discouraged, but I wasn't. I knew that I could be good at this game. I just needed to give myself time. And my goal was to make the new Pokemon game, Scarlet and Violet, be that time. So as I sat in my first class of my last year of law school, I went on my laptop and booked a trip to San Diego for the first regional of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Like literally everyone else, my friends and I brought a Dondozo team to San Diego. And I did alright, enough to get my first championship points ever. I was on the board as my journey towards Worlds. My next event was the Orlando Regional Championships, and we cooked. We brought in a Spathra Sandy Shocks team built around using gravity to make hypnosis 100% accurate, and I started off the day 5-1, but then just completely choked. But my friend Max made it all the way to day 2, top 32ing what was, at the time, the biggest regional ever, so shout out to Max. And then I had personal tragedy strike. I'm not going to go into details here because it's not really the point of the video, but I wouldn't wish what happened on my worst enemy. With my mental health in the toilet, I had a choice to make. I know that I'm the type of person that if I stop something because I'm frustrated with it, I'll probably never pick it back up again. And I've put a lot of time into Pokemon at this point, and I wasn't about to give that all up. I put my chin up and did my best to salvage my season. For the rest of the season, I pretty much 6-3'd every event I went to until the North American International Championships.
This will be one of the last times trainers will have the chance to compete for championship points and invites along their road to Worlds in Yokohama, Japan this August.
By the time I was ready to prepare for NAIC, I had graduated law school and was only worried about studying for the bar exam. So while, yes, I did have a lot of studying to do, I could do it basically on my own schedule. So I made a schedule that consisted of me studying for the bar for 8 hours a day and dedicating basically every other minute to Pokemon. For weeks, I kept this schedule, and it led to me just barely squeaking into day 2 of the North American International Championships at 7-2, my first ever day 2 of a major tournament. In fact, despite the terrible momentum loss I've suffered, if I had won one more match at that tournament, I would have qualified for Worlds, but instead I just barely missed it. I mean, either way, I couldn't have gone because I needed to take the bar exam, which was less than a week before, but it's nice to know how close I got. So I knew I'd have to wait till next year. And next season came. The first event of the 2024 competitive Pokemon season was the Pittsburgh Regional Championship, which I tested for with Santino Tarcunio. Santino is the Players' Cup Invitational winner, so he's pretty good at the game. We spent a long time working on this Calm Mind Draining Kiss Fluttermane concept that had done pretty well at Worlds, but we just couldn't really figure out a way to make it super strong. Unfortunately, we spent weeks on it, and Pittsburgh was only a week or two away. Panicked, we both decided to pick something we knew was safe, just standard Tornadus Urshifu offense. I ended up on the version that Emilio Forbes top 16 to the World Championships with, using Bramblegast, and while this team was absolutely strong, it had quite a few inaccurate moves that gave me a chance to get unlucky, and I wasn't good enough at the team to mitigate that chance. So, unfortunately, I went 5-4. Thanks to the size of the tournament, I did manage to squeak into points, but I was super unhappy going from day 2ing the hardest non-Worlds tournament to just barely squeaking into points. For my next few events, it was a lot of the same. I went 6-3 at literally every other regional I went to this year, each time getting some points towards my goal and learning a lot. But honestly, the 2 times my third loss came at round 9 were really emotionally devastating. I felt like I was getting so close, and I just couldn't get where I was. But, as cliched as it sounds, the real prize this season was just how many new friends and connections I made. So many people who I worked with, battled, or just spent time with at events. There's too many people to thank everybody, but on top of Scarlet and everybody else who had been there since the beginning, I really want to say thank you to Yotam Cohen. Yotam's really good at this game. And not only did he help me immensely, he also introduced me to a larger group of players and friends, all of whom really want to succeed and pushed me to succeed as well, which I'm really grateful for. As the season was getting closer and closer to ending, I was sitting around 350 points, which seems low for the 500-point goal, but it's okay, I had a plan. I had planned to attend both EUIC and NAIC this year, and international events give you a significantly larger number of points than regionals do, so they were a great way to boost my points. And the balanced team that I was playing for EUIC seemed tailor-made for me. Lots of Pokemon I loved playing with, like Porygon 2, Golden Go, and Roaring Moon. Then, it happened. For the first time in Scarlet and Violet, I went negative at a major event, ending day 1 of EUIC at 4-5, and obviously at that record with no points. I was devastated. My plan had been to get as many of my points as possible from international events so I could minimize how many weekends I would spend traveling and get to go to cool places, but that plan was blowing up in my face. Luckily, if there's a place for things to go wrong, it's when you're on an international vacation and amongst a whole bunch of friends. So I wasn't too upset, it didn't ruin my weekend or anything, but I definitely was stressed and may or may not have last minute panic booked a flight to Indianapolis to make up some points at that regional. Also, once I got back from Europe, I started to hit local events really hard. I had been kind of neglecting them because for the most part, locals are at least an hour drive for me, but I hit a mid-season and a PC literally every weekend I could after London. And it started to add up. Indianapolis came and went, and I had another 6-3. But this tournament was really valuable. It was the first tournament of Regulation G, the format we would be playing at the Pokemon World Championships. It was invaluable practice. And after this tournament, I had 420 points, which meant that even if I got the least amount of points possible at NAIC, I would qualify for Worlds. Now, for some people, this would mean it's time to relax and prepare for the North American International Championships. But not me, because I am an anxious little man. So instead, I continued to spend every waking moment agonizing and going to more PCs and mid-seasons, until suddenly, I was in a weird position. 2 weeks left until NAIC. If I got second at one more mid-season showdown, I would qualify for Worlds. However, there was only one mid-season showdown within 2 hours driving distance left, meaning I would only have one more shot. If I wanted to squeeze one more event in, I would have to drive over 4 hours to do so. So, being a completely rational, normal human being who knows this is just a game, I got in my car at 3 in the morning, drove 4 hours, and entered the mid-season showdown. Now, I couldn't just get an okay result, I would need to get second place at this tournament. And I walked into a room full of really good players. Yotam, Justin Karras, Justin Tang, Luca Paz, and honestly a bunch of others. All of whom I know are just frankly better at this game than I am. But I didn't drive 4 hours and give up my Sunday just to give up, so time to battle. And somehow, whether through luck or skill, I made it to the second place of the tournament. When I got to the finals, I frankly didn't care if I won or lost. I'd already qualified for Worlds. I got what I came there for. And I did it. I qualified for the Pokemon World Championships. Now, we had the rest of the season. I went 5-4 at NAIC, getting some points, but I didn't really care. Everything was all towards Worlds, and I'd achieved my goal. Now, I know my story isn't the flashiest about how I crushed some tournament out of seemingly nowhere the way Patrick Connors or Justin Tang did, but it's my reality. It's what happened. For me, my first Worlds invitation isn't the result of natural talent and discipline than in one person. It's a story of me slowly getting better over years because I love the game whether I'm winning or losing. You know, in a way, at this point, Scraw VGC has served its original purpose. It's gone from me posting videos about me trying to figure out what I'll play at my first ever regional to a video about how I qualified for the World Championships for the first time. I can point at an invitation and say pretty confidently, yeah, I'm good at this game. So I guess I have a choice. It's gonna be the end of Scraw, or I get set a new goal. Frankly, I don't want to quit. I'm having too much fun. So a new goal it is. Up until now, Scraw's been out documenting whether or not I can get good at this game. And at this point, I think it's pretty fair to say that I am. So I guess the next logical step is to see if I can become one of the best at the game. I hope you'll stick around to see if we can pull it off. Thanks for watching. Bye.